Good morning, fellow ruminators. Welcome back to another session, Rumination with Andrew. Thank you for joining as we are about to discuss some very important topical matters. Now, this morning, we are going to look briefly at the US empire, just some of the thoughts. I'm not going to look in depth at it. In fact, throughout my tenure here on the videos, I'm not sure how long these videos will last in terms of how long I will be in the business, because only God knows, especially what is happening in our world at the moment. We are being censored right, left, and center. So we do not know how long our voices will be heard. But once they can be heard, I will continue to sound the trumpet. Now, today, let's look at a little thoughts, some thoughts that were shared by one of my favorite writers in recent times, Chalmers Johnson, in his book, The Sorrows of Empire. And I just wanted to share some insights here about what he's saying. And, for you to think, because a lot of you do not understand, particularly Americans who live on American soil, that the United States is an empire. It is not a democracy. Democracy and empire cannot live on the same soil. They cannot survive. They cannot co-care. They cannot reason together, right? So you have to understand that, and you have to come to grips with that very sad reality. And in many cases, the empire probably could have been avoided if Americans were a little bit more alert, but they're so simplistic in their understanding of the world and understanding of Americans and America itself. Americans are not keen to understand what is happening in America itself and what is happening, in the world, right? The shopping and the Walmarts and technology have captured Americans' attention, that they are not really willing to sit down and to focus, right, on what is happening. And when we have 70% of a population, like we do have for the American population, that are on antidepressants, it shows you that the mind is not healthy and the mind is not fit and ready to grasp very profound truths. That's very important that you understand that. And Americans are on a lot of pharmaceuticals, and that's not necessarily good for the mind. So you've got to understand that you've got now to wake up and to see what the realities are. Many people in the world outside of America understand the agenda of the US military and the US empire, because they have experienced it and are still experiencing it right at the moment. Whatever is happening in Haiti presently is because of this expansion of the US empire. People are asking, why are they in Haiti? Why are they in this, what is deemed to be the poorest country of the Western Hemisphere? If you understand the role of the US empire for full spectrum dominance, and there is a book called Full Spectrum Dominance, then you will be able to understand. You might not understand everything, right? Because no one understands everything, but you understand the gist, and nobody is going to be able to explain to you what you've got to sit down and you've got to try to unpack what is happening as far as the military, the US empire is concerned. Now, listen to what Chalmers Johnson is saying on page 310 of his book, Sorrows of Empire. This is the first paragraph. Empires do not last, and their ends are usually unpleasant, which means that they're not going to end well. Americans like me, born before World War II, have personal knowledge, in some cases, personal experience of the collapse of at least 6 empires: those of Nazi Germany, Imperial Japan, Great Britain, France, the Netherlands, and the Soviet Union. Right? All of these empires have collapsed, right? Even when they were going through their heydays and behaving as if they were on top of the world, they eventually collapsed, and not in a very beautiful manner, right? In a painful manner. You've got to understand that. If one includes all of the 20th century, 3 more major empires came tumbling down: the Chinese, Austro-Hungarian, and Ottoman. A combination of imperial or overstretched, rigid economic institutions and an inability to reform weakened all these empires, leaving them fatally vulnerable in the face of disastrous wars, many of which the empires themselves invited. So many of the wars that are being waged by the United States, as waged in previous empires, the United States actually invited these wars, right? Created them, manufactured them, and then sold them to you. And you believe her. When she comes and she tells you about a war that she's waging, you believe everything that is said. And you turn on your television and you see the war and you say, yes, it's happening. And the United States has to control and has to bring about order in the world, not understanding that she manufactured that or those wars, right? You've got to understand that. So we talk about the imperial overstretch, which means that she is in every corner of the world. This is what Chalmers is saying. There is no reason to think that an American empire will not go the same way. There is no reason. It is going to go the same way. And if you read Revelation 13, you understand that it is going to go the same way. Now, caution for those of us who have studied Bible prophecy, we understand that the United States is not just going to go down, in the way many people think it's going to go down. It is God who is going to give it a big blow, right? With a stone. When Christ comes to take his people, that we are going to have this empire going down. However, the fact of the matter is that the freedoms that you know now will go down, will definitely go down before Christ comes back to the earth. So you will have remnants of the American empire, but it will not be this freedom-loving country that Americans think they live in, right? It will be dictatorship, because that's what is coming, right? It is going to morph into a dictatorship, which is going to be a dictatorship empire, if you will, right? Now you can call it, you have some remnants of democracy, you have some remnants of freedom, but eventually you are going to lose everything. And that is what Americans have to understand. Eventually you're going to lose everything. You're going to wake up one morning and see that everything has been lost. And if you read the history of the Jews and the fact that they were so also patriotic and they thought they thought highly of their temple, even though Christ told them that it was going to be destroyed by the Romans. They didn't believe Christ because they thought that how could, our temple, right? Our temple is so great. It is the attraction of the world. And eventually in AD 70, they woke up one morning and that temple was destroyed. That is what you've got to understand. What God says, he means it, and he is no respecter of persons or places, right? America is just another place like any other place in the world. There is no reason to think that an American empire will not go the same way, and for the same reasons. If efforts at globalization delayed the beginnings of what collapsed for a while, the shift to militarism and imperialism settles the issue. Right? So we know that the United States has shifted to militarism and imperialism. Something that Americans need to think about. And here is what Chalmers is saying to end his book on page 312, the last paragraph on 312. This is his final paragraph. And what an intellect this guy had. There is one development that could conceivably stop the process of overreaching. The people could retain control of Congress because Congress is now in the control of the military-industrial complex. Congress does not run the show, right? Just like the Jamaican Parliament or the British Parliament, they really don't run the show, and you've got to understand that. And people are beginning to understand that, especially in light of what happened 4 years ago. I shall not say the name because, of course, I will be censored. But the fact of the matter is that if you were following what happened, 4 years ago and how the world leaders behave, you would understand that they do not run the show. And as I'm talking about that in terms of what happened some years ago, you must understand that this juncture of the history, you can't be afford to be reading books of the 1940s and what happened, if you're reading them, you have to be able to connect the ideas, which many of you cannot do. You don't make connections very well because you look around and you say, oh, I see this and I see that. You cannot read. Is that what you see is what you do not see that you have to unpack. And it requires very intelligent and also in-depth reading. You've got to sit down somewhere and begin to focus. And many of you are not able to focus because we have so many distractions around us. And the news media, have warped your ideas in terms of the world in which you live. And if you should turn off the TV, if you would only turn off the TVs, you'd understand and begin to delve into more important matters. But you're so much caught up with watching what you see on the TV that your brain have been weakened. Now, the people could control the Congress, they could retake control of Congress, reform it along with the corrupted election laws that have made it into a forum for special interests. All right, so Congress is really, according to Chalmers, a forum for special interests, for vested interests, if you will. Turn it into a genuine assembly of democratic representatives and cut off the supply of money to the Pentagon and the secret intelligence agencies. All right, that's how it could be done. But I don't think that can be done at this juncture of American history. We have a strong civil society, which I'm wondering, I don't think now we do. This guy was writing probably in the early 2000s, when America at that juncture still had a relatively strong civil society. But in recent times, particularly after COVID-19, the society has become very polarized, right? Very polarized. And we know when a society has become polarized, we know that it is on its final lap. Now, we have a strong civil society that could, in theory, overcome the entrenched interests of the armed forces and the military-industrial complex. At this late date, however, this is what Chalmers Johnson is saying, at this late date, however, it is difficult to imagine how Congress, much like the Roman Senate in the last days of the Republic, could be brought back to life and cleansed of its endemic corruption, right? Endemic corruption that is found in Congress because of vested interests, right? These guys go into Congress and they go in not being millionaires, and after after so many years, you find them multi-millionaires because they are aligned with vested economic and military interests. You've got to understand that. Failing such a reform, Nemesis, the goddess of retribution and vengeance, the punisher of pride and hubris, which Americans also have to get rid of, because sometimes, you say only the politicians who demonstrate hubris, right? But Americans tend to think that there are some special people on the world, and that the fact that their leaders are going around and killing people and destroying lives, that, oh, we are superior, right? But you need to understand the goddess of Nemesis is on its way. And Chalmers says here, waits patiently as the goddess of Nemesis for her meeting with us. Right? So whatever is happening now in Haiti, in Gaza, and just around the world in which the US military is waging war, the same strategies and the same approaches used on foreign soil will be used on US soil. And I dare say to you that it's going to be even more, it is going to be deadlier on US soil than you find happening in Haiti or happening in the Gaza area. This, when the US becomes in its military quest for full spectrum dominance, it does not respect anyone that comes in its way. It will kill and it will suppress and it will subjugate anyone that dares to challenge its superior military undertakings and military ambitions to conquer the entire world. Something you need to understand. Now, today I wanted to speak briefly about what's his name, Guy Philippe, right? And he is the well, a contestant for president, I would think. It's alleged that he's a contestant for the presidency of Haiti. Now, Guy Philippe, was, as we have suggested on previous, videos or in previous videos, that he was one of the main golpistas, right? Which means coup d'etat leaders who actually aided and abetted the United States in the overthrow of President Jean-Bertrand Aristide in 2004. All right, so remember now that, for those of you who do not understand Haitian history, that you had this priest who was described as this liberal, progressive, liberation theology priest who came to power. Round about 1990, he won the elections in Haiti, right? And he was the first democratically elected president in the nation's history, as in Haiti's history. And, the people were, for the most part, loved him, and they wanted him to be their president and to be their political leader. Now, the United States did not like his progressive policies in terms of educating the people and also trying to seek ways in which he could build the Haitian parliament, right, and just improve the general lifestyle and the life of the people in Haiti who had, recently, in recent times, in the decade of the 1990s, they had just come out of a very brutal years of brutal dictatorship from, that was imposed upon them by the US through the leader or the leaders of, or the leadership, I should say, of Papa Doc, right? And the Duvaliers, Papa Doc and Baby Doc, right? As they were formerly called. We know that Baby Doc was, siphoned out of the island. He was taken out of the island in 1986 because of the Haitians who actually rose up against him. They were tired of what he was doing and his suppressive, political machinations. And the United States actually went down there and took him out of Haiti and brought him to France, right? So he lived in France for many years until Obama then, took him back to Haiti. Was it about 2010, 2011, after the earthquake, right? Or 2012, can't remember the date when he actually returned to Haiti, even though he should not have, because in Haiti, I understand that, they had crimes against him, that they had recorded crimes against Baby Doc, and he should have, showed up in court and, should have been, he should have gone to prison, if you will, for the crimes against humanity that he had committed. But be it as it may, he went back to Haiti. I mean, he subsequently died. I think he died around about 2015, 2016, thereabout. I can't remember the date when he died, but he died subsequently subsequently to his return to Haiti in, I think it was 2012 that he returned to Haiti. Now, President Jean-Bertrand Aristide, this charismatic leader in Haiti, the first democratically elected president. Now, Washington was not necessarily very happy with what the priest was doing in terms of his liberal agenda and to develop his quest to develop the economy of Haiti. Washington was opposed to that because Washington has always sought to subjugate Haiti, not only Washington, but Ottawa and also the French also, who, shall we say, Paris, since we're calling Ottawa and Washington. Let's say Paris, also another entity in wanting to subjugate the Haitians and to make them not progressive, to keep them in dire poverty and destitution. After his election in 1990, 8 months afterwards, the US Marines went in, or the military, I should say, and they took him out. They took President Jean-Bertrand Aristide out of power. And then Clinton brought him back to power in 1994, and he was there until he finished his term. Seems after that he went into, he was silenced, or he went into some I don't know if he was exiled but he was not, on the political scenery between 1997 to 2000. That is what I find a little bit mystifying. And then he came back on the scene in 2000 when he won the election. And it seems that the United States and Canada and also France were not particularly happy that he had won the 2000 elections again. And I think he won it by 95% of the um of the population. Even though I understand that in the year 2000 also that the opposition party did not contest the elections, right? So even though he won by a landslide, and we could say that he was the democratically elected candidate or president, but it was an election that was not contested by the opposition. So it's a little bit also very interesting in terms of, shall we say that he was democratically elected and he won by a landslide? Well, in terms of the numbers, yes, he won by a landslide, but the fact that the opposition party did not contest the election in 2000 suggests that, can we say that he was democratically elected? You know, these are very complex matters and complex questions, right? That I'm sure that I can't unpack, and perhaps the documents or the information we might not be privy to. Now, in 2003, it seems because Washington wanted him out, that's President John Bertrand Aristide, they were creating a lot of economic problems in Haiti. A lot of economic sanctions were imposed upon the country, along with the rigid IMF and the World Bank's, austere conditionalities. And because they wanted the people to rise up against him, because when people are experiencing, rigid economic situations and they can't survive, then they sometimes, will rise up against their government. And it seems like Washington wanted that. Now, in 2003, when President John Bertrand Aristide decided that he was going to, request that France pay Haiti for the reparations that they had, because France in 1825 approached Haiti and said, in order for you, because after Haitian independence, many countries did not recognize Haiti as an independent country, including the United States. And one of the things that you need to understand, even though it was as a result of the Haitian Revolution and the success of that revolution that we had the United States being able to survive as a country. Because remember now that one of his major agendas was to, if he had won Haiti, if Haiti had not won the revolution against slavery and French colonialism and imperial undertakings there, then Napoleon's agenda was to go to the United States and to conquer that country, because Napoleon wanted to control the entire world, just like the United States at this moment want to control the world, right? It was Napoleon's major quest to control everything here in this Western hemisphere, right? And his eyes were on the recently independent country, what we call now the United States of America, right? Because remember at the time that Louisiana, that section was still French, was a French territory, right? So that's, that section there of the, and I think other parts of the United States also were French dominated. So it was Napoleon's ambition to, to reclaim those territories and to ensure that they control the entire United States, right? That was Napoleon's quest. And in fact, there is history to suggest that the people like Jefferson's and, and the other founding fathers, they were fearful of what could have been, if Napoleon was successful. And that is what one of the reasons they were watching. They were not pro the blacks and pro the slaves fighting for their freedom, but they wanted to see how the revolution would end. And I'm sure they were relieved when they realized that the slaves had won, not because they were happy for the slaves and for Black people, that's the founding fathers, the US founding fathers, but they were happy that, Napoleon and his soldiers did not win, because had they won, then their next agenda, their next ambition was to overthrow the United States, right, of America, as in the set, because remember now the revolution lasted from 1791 to 1804, and there were different segments, different phases, we can say, of the Haitian Revolution. Now, people like the Jeffersons, that's why Jefferson, after the revolution was fought and Haitians won it, he went quickly and negotiated with the French to have bought the territory of Louisiana, right? Because, then if he can control that, then he knows that the French will not be able to come at any given moment to attack the United States territory. So that was something that Americans had to understand, that without the Haitian Revolution and the success of the slaves, it might be that the United States would not have been, the experiment would have failed, right? Very important that Americans understand that. All right. So just don't think it's some Black people who fought some revolution and, and some people in white, some European Americans just was, some spectators watching what was going on. It was a very important revolution, not only for Haitians, but for all peoples in the Americas and around the world, because freedom is something that all of us as individuals, as human beings, aspire to. We don't want to be enslaved by anyone. We want to be free as human beings, right? And the Haitians fought for that, and they won. And that revolution also inspired many other slave plantations, or other slaves, I should say, who resided in other parts of the Western Hemisphere, the Caribbean, and also in the United States of America. Now let's go back to Jean-Bertrand Aristide. All right, so Jean-Bertrand Aristide, when he requested that, Haiti should get reparations for the millions of francs that they had to pay France, because France said, you allowed us to lose. We lost our main colony, our main source of income, our main source of wealth, which was the Haitian plantations, the Haitian slave plantations, was France's main source of wealth and power, right? That is how they were able to build a formidable French empire. And they said, we lost it because the slaves rose up against us, and because we have lost so much wealth, we need them to pay us money. So the slaves had to, the former slaves had to repay France for their freedom, which was ridiculous. That, you fought for your freedom and you won, and then you have to pay the person who enslaved you for years for the freedom that you won and that you deserve and that you merit, right? But that was what happened. And that's how Europeans tend to think, in a very infantile manner. And they thought that, and because Haiti wanted to be recognized by these so-called powerful nations, because, if they were, isolated, alienated from the rest of the world and from these powerful empires, how are they going to survive? If they're not getting any sort of, they can't form any diplomacy with these countries. So Haiti decided to pay. But that payment, impoverished Haiti, and they had to take out loans, to pay, and they did not complete that payment until 1947, right? So think about trying to pay off a loan from 1825, when the loan, when they started to pay that, or when the Haitians started to pay back France that loan, that I think it was 125 million francs, which people are suggesting now would worth over 100 billion US dollars, right? So they started paying off that loan from 1825 and did not complete it, the payment of that loan, until 1947. So can you imagine how the load that was on Haitian backs, and the fact that their economy would have been set years behind, right? Because of what was happening while they're building the French economy and also American economy, because Americans also was a part of it. Americans, the leaders were a part of it because, the Haitians could not pay off their loan at given moments, and they had to borrow from American banks, right? So that they could repay their loan. And Americans, sided with France because that's what they do, and to inflict serious harms, economic harms on Haiti, including the first occupation in 1915. Now, Jean-Bertrand Aristide, having asked the French for reparations, Sarkozy, then the prime minister of France, was not particularly pleased. And he thought, why would this priest be asking us for reparations? And he was not, he was angered, and he decided that he would ask the United States to take him out, right? And that is how he was taken out in the coup on February 29th, when the US military went there. But remember now that in order to do that, to undertake that coup, that the United States requested the help of other nations like Canada. And Canada, what the Canadians were, their soldiers, their military were the ones who went and occupied the airports and the ports and ensured that there would not have been any protest, and that the president and his wife and children would have to leave the country. Now, what happened afterwards is that after that coup is that, Haiti went through a successive, number of presidents who were really unelected and other government officials, right? Because it was a coup that took out the entire government, the democratically elected government. Think about that, right? So every time now a government is going to be elected, it will be done by foreign powers that we call the core group. And the core group really is made up of, diplomats from France, from Canada, from the United States, from Germany, and from Spain. Now, it's interesting that when the United States went to occupy Haiti in 1915, that their major quest was also to get the Germans out, right? The Germans at the time seemed to have wanted, had interest in the Caribbean, especially in that section of the Caribbean in Haiti, and they were there, right? And the United States wanted them out. So it's interesting now to fast forward to 2004, and you have them, and you have them working collaboratively. And even though they have their interests. But what is interesting is that these imperial powers will unite to protect vested interests, even when they sometimes are so-called enemies, right? And that is why the United States, says that it doesn't have allies, it has what? Interests, right? It doesn't have any allies. Now, one of the things that is interesting is that Guy Philippe was one of the major coup leaders that the United States used to have, kidnapped and to have abducted the president. It's very, very clear in the book that was written by Rondell Robinson. And I think I read you some excerpts from that book, and it was talking about, presented because, Rondell Robinson was very close to President Jean-Bertrand Aristide and his wife. And he went down there along with his wife, Hazel, who's actually from St. Kitts. Rondell Robinson, African-American, was married to his wife was, citizen of St. Kitts or the Nevis. I can't remember if she's from St. Kitts or the Nevis. Please correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, she's from one of those islands, right? But I don't know if it's St. Kitts or it's the Nevis. But be it as it may, when Ronald Robinson went to Haiti, he and his wife, that's Ronald Robinson and his wife, Hazel, went to Haiti. They spoke to Mildred, that is the president's wife, and Jean-Bertrand Aristide, and they confessed, both of them confessed, both his wife and the president, the former president of Haiti, confessed that they were abducted, that the US military came into their homes, or was he at the parliament? I can't remember if he was, in the house, but I think he might have been at his house. It was at his house, his residence, and they took him out around about 12 o'clock. about that time, midnight. And they abducted the president and took him and sent him on a plane to Africa. That was something that was horrendous. But Guy Phillips, he was there up to 2016. Then he was accused of, attempting to terrorize a police station in Haiti. And after that, the United States, extradited him or made an extradition request from Haiti to have him extradited to the United States in 2016 for, drug running and money laundering in Haiti. Now, when he went to the United States and he stood his trial, he was trying to, of course, like anybody else, to say that he was not guilty, and the United States was only trying to, convict him because he probably had information that they wouldn't want him to release, and that the United States was just trying to harass him. But eventually he pleaded guilty that he was actually involved in drug running, right, or the trading of drugs, and also in money laundering. And he was convicted and he was sentenced for 9 years, right? 9 years. So that happened in 2016, and 9 years he probably would be coming out in 2025. Right? So the entire population of Haiti, including some diplomats, the Dominican ambassador, and among other ambassadors, in Haiti, were shocked when they heard that, that Guy Philippe was going to be returning to Haiti from prison in 2023. I think it was around about 2000. I think they heard in September of 2023, and he returned to Haiti in November of 2023, some months ago, right? People were shocked to know, including the government officials in Haiti, to know that the United States was actually shortening his sentence. And why? Just like, 2 more years or so, and he would have been out of prison, and he could have been, deported or sent back home to Haiti. But that was what happened. And that's the question people are asking, was that coincidental, or did the United States send him back to Haiti to sort of increase the level of instability that is racking that island nation? We don't know. But another question that I would like to ask in terms of the Guy Phillips, when he returned to Haiti in January, he was having a lot of interviews by some of these mainstream media houses like the Guardian newspaper, the BBC's, right, and the New York Times and the Washington Post carried quite a bit of extensive information and reporting on this Guy Philippe. And it's almost like they have this sort of hypocritical nature, the Washington Post and the New York Times, and they reported that he was obviously extradited to the United States and afterwards deported, and that he was no clean guy. They acknowledge that. They had to acknowledge that. It's no open secret. It's an open secret that that Guy Philippe is actually somebody who is a criminal, and that he was one of the main or the major actors in the coup the coup d'etat, in which the former president of Haiti, Jean-Bertrand Aristide, was overthrown, right? Not overthrown, but overthrown, right? Let me say. Now, so that is the whole aspect of what happened in Haiti with Guy Philippe. Now, I would like to ask the question, the fact that Guy Philippe went to Haiti in January and February, he was there calling for the overthrow of Ariel Henry, because it seems like Guy Phillips was not particularly impressed with Ariel Henry, or they seem to be political rivals or political enemies, who knows? But he was calling, even in January, February of this year, for the resignation of Ariel Henry. But Ariel Henry would not resign, all right, until he was forced by, it seems, members of CARICOM and the United States ultimately to resign. My reading of Ariel Henry is that he was also not very, he was the most favored candidate for the presidency, even for in the eyes of the United States of America. But I think at the time of Jovenel Moïse's death, they didn't have a probably better candidate that they thought would be loyal to the United States. The United States took him or chose him. The core group, the United States and the core group chose him to be the president and prime minister of Haiti. Now, remember now that before Jovenel Moïse died, that he had chosen Ariel Henry to have functioned in the capacity as prime minister, but he was assassinated. Some people say 2 months before, 2 days before he had actually given Ariel Henry that particular position. Now, what's interesting is, did the United States foresee that it wanted Ariel Henry out of that office? And is it that, well, is it that they sent, what's his name, Guy Philippe back to Haiti so that he could unseat Ariel Henry? Because we see now Guy Philippe acting as this messiah, right? As if he is going to salvage Haiti out of its nightmare. And there are some, the papers here like Reuters, they carried the story when he actually returned to Haiti. That's Guy Philippe. Let us see what the Reuters here had to say about him. And Reuters is a mainstream paper, so they actually followed the dictates of the United States in terms of reporting. There's nothing special about them, but let us just look at the mainstream media and see what they are suggesting and what they're saying, because we don't want anybody to now to come and censor us, and for you also, the listeners, to say that, oh, this guy is speaking conspiracy, right? Because if it's not coming from mainstream, your minds are so narrow that you won't believe it, right? So that is how you want the show to be run. And then you are going to be actually betrayed by your same leaders. But that's how you think. So let me run with the program. Now we have US deports ex-coup leader to crisis storm Haiti. And this was on November 30th. So that was when he was deported. That's Guy Philippe. Now, the United States on Thursday deported former Haitian coup leader Guy Philippe back to his Caribbean homeland after serving some 6 years in a U.S. prison on charges of money laundering linked to Colombian drug trafficking. Now, remember now that his sentence was for 9 years, and he only completed 6 years out of that 9 years. Why was the United States of America so rushed? Why was it so eager, so anxious to send back to deport Guy Philippe? That is a question that perhaps no one can answer. Philippe, a former police officer who led the 2004 ousting of President Jean-Bertrand Aristide and later won a senatorial race in the rural Grand Anse region, is currently in a police facility near the capital's main airport, a police source told Reuters, right? So it was not immediately clear whether Philippe will continue to be detained. So he was detained up on his deportation. 4 years after Philippe's arrest, President Jovenel Moïse was killed in his home. That's something that is also interesting. So whilst he was in prison, serving his sentence, right, that President Jovenel Moïse was killed. Something that is also very, very mystifying. And shall we say that did Guy Philippe have some hand or have a hand in this assassination, even though he was in prison? I mean, I don't know, and we can't say for certain. Just something to think about, creating a political vacuum that allowed the rise of extremely violent armed gangs, which now control large parts of the country, fueling a dire humanitarian crisis. So you wonder if, after now, after the fact that Jovenel Moïse was killed, and then we have Guy Philippe serving a shorter sentence for the crimes that he had committed because he was convicted, right, of drug trafficking and money laundering. So this is no, speculation here, right? He was convicted in a court, in a US court. So that is something that is very, very interesting and something that you need to think about for yourselves and do your own research on, right? Because here we are the thinking child. I am not here to think for you. You've got to think for yourselves. Now, this is, let's look at the BBC. There was something here. Let me see if I can find that report. Seems like my things are not so properly organized today. So let me see if I could find the report on, yes, there's a BBC that I had organized here. Lots of information on Guy Philippe that you can also go online and do your own research to find out just what is happening. So we have here the BBC, right? So this is a BBC, another mainstream information that is tied to government vested interest. Now we have here former rebel Guy Philippe calls for Haiti PM to resign. So this is what I'm suggesting here, that, and this was written in on March 9th, 2024, quite a recent piece of article. Now, so we have this Guy Philippe, who was convicted, who was, in the United States for drug running and also for money laundering. He's calling for the former acting president or prime minister of Haiti, Ariel Henry, to resign. So Guy Philippe, a leader of the 2004 Haitian coup, has joined calls for Prime Minister Ariel Henry to resign, which he has now resigned. For those of you who probably are not following what is happening in Haiti, Ariel Henry resigned about 2 weeks ago, or a week and a half ago. Philip, who returned to Haiti last year after serving a prison sentence in the United States, told Reuters news agency that he wants to be president. So he's saying that he wants to be president. And remember now that he was taken to the United States in 2016 when they extradited him, and he was sentenced there in a court in, I think, in Florida, right, for 9 years. And the United States authorities only allowed him to complete 6 of the 9 years, right? Which is something very, very interesting because, it's not, I don't think any reason has been advanced as to why they shortened his sentence, right? To date, we have not been told in terms of what happened and why the shortening of that sentence. And we know too, based on what we read in Reuters, that it was 4 years after he had been extradited from Haiti to the United States that the former president of Haiti, Jovenel Moïse, was actually assassinated, something that is quite also bizarre. Haiti's capital has been paralyzed by gang violence recently, and it escalated dramatically when Mr. Henry left for a regional summit last week, right? So obviously he went, and I'm wondering if that was a setup in terms of, sending Mr. Henry, Ariel Henry away, and then he would come back and, well, he was not able to go back. He would not be able to go back. And that would settle the question. He would never be able to be president. Was that a setup? Was it something that was, orchestrated behind closed doors? I don't know. Something that you need also to think about. I think that he was becoming unpopular for the core group, and they might have decided that that's how they wanted to get rid of him. Sometimes people don't necessarily get rid of you by telling you to go out, so they will go through corners and ways of telling you to leave, right? And I think that might have been a way to tell Henri that he needs to go, that he needs to demit office, because had he been in Haiti, maybe it would have been difficult, and it might have been that it would have ended him up in the same manner as Moise actually went. I don't know, right? For you to think about, something for you to really, really think about. Beyond untenable. So we have also on Friday, there was heavy gunfire around Haiti's National Palace in Port-au-Prince, news agency EFE reported. The gang violence has seen a jail stormed, police stations torched, and an attempted takeover of Haiti's airports. So this is, we are seeing here the so-called gangs and gangsters, right, as they are creating disorder in that embattled Caribbean nation. Philippe said he did not have a deep connection to the gangs and was not behind the ongoing violence. Now, I think it might have been in the New York Times or in the Washington Post. I have these articles on, but I can't, I can't access the piece here because I'm not subscribed to the Washington Post and the New York Times. But even though I'm not subscribed, you're allowed to read one or two articles. And I did, exceed the maximum articles the other day when I was doing research on, with the Washington Times and the New York Times. But either of these papers, New York Times or the Washington Post, did carry something, or another paper, I can't remember, but Guy Philippe was suggesting that if he becomes president of Haiti, that he is going to give amnesty, right, to the gangs, right? He's going to do that. That's something to me that is weird. He's not involved, according to him, in the gang operations that are currently happening in Haiti, right? But at the same time, if he becomes president, he's on record of saying, I can't remember if I read that from the Washington Post or the New York Times, but he is on record of saying that he will grant amnesty, right, to the gang members if he should be elected president of the Republic of Haiti. Something I found to be amazing and something worth concentrating on, or focusing on, something that you need to really reflect on and to sort of unpack what is happening with that sort of thinking, right? Because how can you give amnesty to people who are inflicting, serious harms and terrorizing the populace in the way that the gangs, and have killed many people, have held up the country, have paralyzed the nation as the gangs have done. One of the things I found also interesting is the fact that Guy Philippe is also an ex-police chief, right? And the same is Jimmy Barbecue Cherizier. I find that to be amazing. And these two people are trying to be leaders. I'm not sure if Jimmy Cherizier is trying to be president, as Guy Philippe is on record saying. But the fact of the matter is that you have two former chiefs, police chiefs, two former ex-police chiefs, right, who are actually vying for leadership of the country, to run the country, to salvage the country, something that is very, very interesting. I'm not suggesting that it's coincidental, it's conspiratorial, but I'm suggesting that you need to think and ask these questions. You have two of these ex-police chiefs who are actually at the helm, and they are not, I'm sure, are they in harmony in terms of the ideas? I don't know. I don't think so. I don't think Guy Philippe is actually working with Jimmy Cherizier, right? I don't think so. But who is funding Jimmy Cherizier? Have you ever wondered about that? I have thought about that, and I've wondered who is funding Jimmy Cherizier, and who is funding also Guy Philippe, right? We need to find out who are their sponsors, their funders, because that is what we need to understand. Now, this was an article I read in the NPR newspaper online. And the title of the article is "A Plan to Get a Transitional Government in Place in Haiti is Being Tested." And let me share my screen just to allow you to see, right, and to verify what I am saying. And perhaps if you want to go and pull up the article for yourselves and to read it for yourselves so that you can follow. Because don't believe me, you've got to test and to verify and to confirm the facts for yourselves. Now, the plan to get a transitional government in place in Haiti is being tested, and this was written by A. Martinez and Ider Peralta. right? And it's a days after Henri's prime minister announced his intention to resign, politicians of all stripes have started jockeying for power. Haitians are expressing reservations. So the Haitians are not impressed with the people who are trying to get into power because I think they are aware that all the sides in who are contesting for power might be controlled by the same people, by the core group and the United States and all of these people. I think the Haitians are not impressed. They know the confusion that the US and the core group have created in Haiti. Now, he's talking to many people. I wasn't following this interview clearly because this is something that Guy Philippe says, and because many people are talking this in one interview. Sometimes I wonder what's going on here with this interview. But this is Guy Philippe talking. The biggest gang in Haiti is the state of Haiti itself. This is Guy Philippe talking. I don't know where they met him, how they had access to him. Based on what I read based on the article that I read here in the NPR, these journalists seem to have been at the border between Haiti and the Dominican Republic, and they were trying to get over into Haiti, to cross over into Haiti, but they were forbidden to do so because of security reasons, according to the authorities. It's the president, the prime minister, the ministers, the elite. They are the worst gangs in Haiti, right? And this is Guy Philippe speaking, and he's not talking anything about the United States. Notice he says that the gangs are from the Haitian state, right? He says the biggest gang in Haiti is the state of Haiti itself, right? He's not saying that the gangs are coming from France or from Canada or from the United States. It's the Haitians themselves, according to Guy Philippe. Now, Peralta is asking, it's been stalled, which referring to the Kenyan multinational, forces. The Kenyans who are supposed to lead this force say they will not send their police until Haiti has a new leadership. This deployment was approved by the UN last year, and it has been delayed over and over, and this is yet one more wrinkle. Now, do you know that the multinational forces coming from Kenya, the UN has approved the deployment of the forces there, but they are not going to be, they're not UN, or they're not going to be counted as UN soldiers, right? So the UN Security, the Security Council, right, has approved the deployment of these soldiers, including the ones coming from Jamaica and Bahamas, but they will not be, they're not going to be viewed or not going to be seen as UN soldiers or treated, shall I say, as UN soldiers, which is something to think about because it means, therefore, that if they, violate Haitian rights, right, if they commit any violations against Haitian rights, then they will not be held accountable. Now, something to think about. Martinez, and one more thing, you're reporting from the Dominican Republic side of the border. Are you hoping to get into Haiti? Now, listen to what Peralta is saying. That's a sore subject. And Martinez said, okay, Peralta is resolved. But look, we've been trying, but Dominican authorities have not allowed us to leave their country. Right? So it means, therefore, that it's going to be very difficult for journalists to get into Haiti to see what is happening there. And Martinez says, oh, wow. And Peralta says, by land and cross into the border into Haiti. They say it's for our own safety. They say it's to avoid a diplomatic problem with Haiti. The airports are closed in Haiti, so a land crossing with the Dominican Republic is the only way for us to get closer to this story, which they can't. Now, how are we going to believe what the media is saying if journalists, dispassionate journalists cannot get into Haiti to see what's going on the ground? So everything that we're hearing from New York Times and from the Guardian newspapers and from all of these papers are but sometimes, speculations and controlled information, right? But unfortunately, despite days of appeals to the Dominican Foreign Ministry, to immigration authorities, the presidency, we have not been allowed to exit the Dominican Republic, to cross into Haiti to bring our listeners this story. Something that is very, very important for you to understand, right? That Haiti is controlled by um, people and interests that we are not certain about. And if the journalists are not able to go there and to report dispassionately and to try to lend some, objectivity to what is happening on the ground, then I think that we will not know what is happening. We will always remain in the dark. And this is one of the reasons I've told you that we are experiencing another dark age. Because if we do not have exposure to information and access to information as we should, we know it's a very volatile and dangerous battlefield, but that's the whole nature of the job for journalists. They need to go there, they need to see what's happening. Yeah, they need to have some form of protection, right? But they need to see what is happening on the ground so that they can, let us know. And some people are suggesting that's one of the reasons why the United States want to ban, apps like TikTok, because there are TikTokers who will go on the ground if they were allowed, right? And they would just film. They would just videotape what's going on, record what is happening on the ground for us to see with our own eyes, right? There are people who do that, but the United States wants to get rid of these apps so that they can have your information controlled, right? And you'll always remain in the dark and remain in ignorance of what is happening around the world. And you just have to depend on the New York Times, right? And the Washington Post and the Guardian newspaper and the BBCs to fill you in with their lies. So that is what happens here. Let me see here what I had. It's interesting that I saw this piece. I might not share this with you right now, because I think the next time we meet, I want to look at the Ottawa Initiative, because that is something that you need to also understand, and something that you need to do further research on the Ottawa Initiative. Now, to end this video, I would like to share my screen. This is the face of Chalmers Johnson, and he has written 4 books on the United States Empire. And I think that you need to get those 4 books and read them for yourselves and try to understand what Chalmers is saying. This guy is a very important intellectual and is someone that you want to acquaint, his works you want to acquaint yourselves with. So you have here Chalmers Johnson. This is the face of Chalmers Johnson. And Chalmers Johnson, who was the president of Japan Policy Research Institute and the author of the best-selling books Blowback, The Sorrows of Empire, and Nemesis, which make up his Blowback trilogy. He wrote for the Los Angeles Times, the London Review of Books, Harper's Magazine, The Nation, and TomDispatch.com. Notice here that he's not, or has not written, it seems, for the New York Times. Well, he did write for the Los Angeles Times, which at the time, might have been carrying important information. Yeah, because it seemed that the Los Angeles Times was, in former times, not as controlled as it is at the moment. Now, we have Blowback, his first book that he wrote, The Cost and Consequences of American Empire, right? This was also very, very an interesting read for me and an eye-opener in terms of what happens or what happened in the Asian world. If you want to understand everything that is happening in Asia, right, in Japan, Thailand, in China, right, you would want to read that book. The Sorrows of Empire, which I have been reading ever since, and I think I try to read this book at least twice per year to understand and to delve into the most important elements of his piece. This is a required reading. And for those of us who are Seventh-day Adventists and who have talked about prophecy, Revelation 13, 14, even though he has nothing here to say about prophecy, but this book is prophetic And I would say that I would read this book as much as you can, right, to digest it. In sitting and reading it once will not give you everything that needs to be focused on. You have to read and reread and reread, right? Because he has a lot of information packed into this one book. Now, Nemesis is also another one which I try to read at least once per year because it's also very, very important. Now, this one I started to read. I think I've gone through 3 chapters. I think this is a compilation of essays. This is his last book, Dismantling the Empire, America's Last Best Hope. I would also advise you to read because I think he went back from 9/11 right up and he's looking very closely at the American empire. And I would also recommend people that you understand that after 2020, and you know what happened in 2020, that our world shifted, right? And it made a seismic shift. And you've got to know in what direction that shift went, right? It's now time to read about what happened in detail 4 years ago and how those policies, how those changes have transformed the world in which we live, not for the better, but for the worse, right? So you need to read, you need to delve into that information. And there are books out there that you need to go and read about what took place 4 years ago and how that particular movement, whatever you want to call it, epidemic, changed the world in which we live and every sphere, right? So you need to understand that. Thank you so much for joining. I hope to see you in another interview, not another video, not interview, but in another video when we see each other next time. Remember to like, to share, and to subscribe, and to leave a thoughtful comment. Thank you so much. All the best to you. Adios.